Cool. So for my assignment for the game companies research, my favorite game company is probably Nintendo. So I decided to do some research about them. So initially, I asked them about a pretty broad, tell me more about my favorite game company, Nintendo. So they gave me the basics, the history, when it was founded. Um, this definitely jumped out at me. The parts that it was involved in a taxi service and a love hotel chain, which I lived in Japan for a few years. My wife's Japanese, and I speak Japanese for a living. Love hotels are basically like hookup flop houses because a lot of people live with their parents or like to cheat on their spouses. So that's very interesting that they were involved in that. It talks about their entry into the video games, of course, the iconic franchises, their innovation, characters, lots of cool stuff. So, the first thing that jumped out, yeah, they were in love hotel business, so that's very interesting. But, yeah, that's interesting that to stay afloat, they went into love hotels as a way of making some money. Couples seeking privacy for romantic encounters. Boy, is that G-rated. But yeah, that's good that they're not involved in that anymore. So that's another thing that jumped out at me was that they transitioned from a playing card company to video games. Japanese companies are usually famous for being extremely risk averse. So that's surprising to have something like that happen. So yeah, innovation is not the bread and butter of Japanese company. It's doing the same thing over and over again and perfecting it. But the risk taking and the innovation of Nintendo has definitely paid off. And one thing I got started in video games with the Game Boy. I didn't own any console games, and we didn't have a computer that could play games when I was little. So I got my first Game Boy one Christmas, so I was interested in that. I didn't know about this Gunpei Yokoi. I'd never heard of him. I think that might be a J. That might be Junpei. Might be how that should be spelled. But that's interesting to know that he was the father of the Game Boy, and also worked on the Virtual Boy. And we find out that that's actually why he left Nintendo, is due to the failure of the Virtual Boy. Learning some more about him, that made me ask, about any like wild cards or crazy people in Nintendo's history. Because yeah, like it says, they do have a family-friendly and conservative image. So, of course, the gentleman who got them into love hotels, and then Yokoi, who was very innovative in going into the handheld gaming arena. And I think a lot of people know Iwata. He's probably the most famous Nintendo person. But that's good to know that he's a nice guy, because lots of Japanese managers are not. And I asked a little more about Yokoi because I liked the Game Boy and I was interested in his situation. But that's interesting. I've never heard of Koto Laboratory. Never heard of the Wonder Swan. And that's kind of too bad that he died in a car wreck. That's not fun. But yeah, the Virtual Boy gave me a headache. Very cool thing, but definitely was not a success. And then, like requested, I asked about the most popular games, and of course, Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, Super Mario. Those are pretty much the big titles. I'd agree with that list. And Pokemon is probably my favorite Nintendo franchise. Like I said, I was big into the Game Boy, and I remember when I got Pokemon for Christmas, and it really changed my life. I mean, that game was awesome. And I actually lived and studied in Machida, Tokyo, where he's from. So that was really cool. I kind of remembered that when I was doing this, and that's really cool that, it's based on his childhood of classifying bugs, and there's actually 151 Pokemon, because that's how many bug species he collected. And I didn't realize it took 6 years to produce that game. And I knew that it was extremely successful worldwide. But yeah, so it was really cool to learn some more about Nintendo. Excuse me. And this has been kind of a cool assignment. So yep.